Okay, good afternoon and welcome everyone. Thank you for being here and welcome back to the British Institute for Libyan and Northern African Studies online seminar series. Um, Today's speaker is, I'm sure, familiar to most of you, as she is, of course, the director of BILNAS, Professor Anna Leone. Anna is professor in the Department of Archaeology at Durham University and specializes in the study of late antique, early Byzantine, and early Islamic periods in the Mediterranean, with a focus on the transformation of urban areas and the impact of religious transitions from paganism to Christianity to Islam. She has published 2 monographs, Changing Townscapes in North Africa from Late Antiquity to the Arab Conquest, which came out in 2007, and The End of the Pagan City in 2013. Anna is a very experienced field archaeologist, and she's very involved in the protection of heritage in the MENA region, capacity building, and in the fight against illicit trafficking. So we are just really delighted to have her speak to us today on just one of the many interesting things that she works on, which is Crumbling History, the fading material culture of the Tataouine region of Tunisia and the Jebel Nafusa in Libya. Now, just before I hand over to Anna, just a very quick reminder, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A box that you will find at the bottom of your screen, and we will go through them after the lecture. So without further ado, Anna, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Nicole, and good evening, good afternoon, everyone. And before I start, I would like just remember our colleague Robert Marcotte, who passed away 2 days ago after a battle with cancer. And Robert Marcotte was an Egyptologist with interest of the contacts between Egypt and the neighboring regions. And in this capacity, he did work on the Egypt and Libya. And he was the chairman of the former Society for Libyan Studies, now BILNAS. And he was a man with great sense of humor and a fantastic person. So I think many of you will remember him, and in due course, in the next months, we will organize something in his memory. I now start talking about the project. Today, I will present the outcomes of a project funded by the Cultural Protection Funds that started in 2023 and will finish in December. The project was originally looking at Tataouine and Jebel Nafusa, but due to political reasons, our work in the Nafusa has been stopped for a year and a half and just recently restarted. We also have another funded project by Alif at the edge of the mountains that is focusing primarily on the Jebel Nafusa. And so we are able now to continue the work on the Jebel Nafusa. What I'm presenting today is, of course, preliminary because we still have to complete both the projects. And also it will lead to a publication at the very end of the project. So this is the region we are looking at. We are looking at this geographical area that includes the very south of Tunisia and the region of Tataouine and the Jebel Nafusa, a key geographical area that also overlaps in some parts with the Limes Tripolitanus in the Roman period. So now, although nowadays the two borders, this area is divided by the two borders of Tunisia and Libya, in antiquity, these two areas were connected by the Limes Tripolitanus and also were inhabited by the Amazigh communities in the medieval period and in modern times, who developed a unique way of inhabiting this very complex landscape. And in fact, this is a landscape, as you can see, very dry, very beautiful. You really have this sense of space, but also very difficult to inhabit. And these populations from the 11th century managed to, in fact, transform and use this landscape to their favor and inhabited it. So what I'm presenting today is, of course, not only my work, because as you will see, the scale of the project and the complexity of what we did wouldn't have allowed me to do it on my own. So here is my core team. Amar Othman was our Tunisian director. Moftah Haladad from Azzaytuna University, who is a partner in the project, who has been responsible for the GIS and for the GIS and for the training. Ali Thepti, who is the local inspector and the Institut National de Patrimoine. Massimo Brizzi, Patricia Edwards, and Anthony Russell, who have been key in documenting these sites in both Libya and Tunisia. Chris Boyd, who has been filming, because as we will see at the end of the presentation, we also did some documentaries. The project also looked at the intangible heritage that I'm not going to consider today for obvious reason. This will be another presentation. This was led by Anita Radini at the University College Dublin, Mabrouk Lazar at the Institut des Beaux-Arts de Tataouine, Imed Bensoura at Alexo, Ismahen Ben Barka at Ksar Said. And finally, we had a team that looked specifically at climate change and studied the rock and the formation of the rock and the deterioration. And this is led by Lisa Moll at the University of West England, who was working with Alik Leslie and Mahadi Tahar. And of course, what I'm presenting today is primarily on the archaeology and the work we did. Finally, our trainees have been essential to collect all the documents and the documentation and to support us in the creation of this project. And these are from the Institut National de Patrimoine and from the Department of Antiquities of Libya. And you can see them all here. The primary goal of the project was to document and safeguard archaeological sites through a combination of advanced technique, which included GIS mapping, GPS survey, drone imaging, 3D recording, LiDAR, condition assessment, conservation planning, and conservation. These tools are essential for preserving this fragile heritage, but also the documentation process has opened the door to a deepened exploration to the complex historical layers embedded within these regions that until now have never been investigated in a way that is systematic. So beyond the refining of effective and dependable methods for heritage documentation and conservation, the project also confronts the urgent deterioration and provides new elements for understanding the history of these regions. And my presentation today will balance between issues of conservation and historical evidence that are emerging from our work. Both regions are very rich in remains which are under-investigated. So our work has focusing also on a larger scale in trying to map and reassess earlier work. In particular, in the region of Tataouine, we have reassessed the work by Paul Trousset in the 80s, the work by David Mattingly on the Libus Tripolitanus and by Isabella Siostrom on the Islamic Tripolitania. And in the Nafusa, which is this part south here, we have reconsidered the work done in the 70s by Philip Kenrick, Owen Brogan, Mohamed Warfalli, led by James Allen. Warfalli also worked specifically on the mosques, and the mosques of the Jebel Nafusa were also considered later in a recent publication by Vilnas, by Virginie Prevost. So starting diachronically, Roman remains in both Tataouine and Nafusa are scattered and poorly documented. And we will also have to consider the medieval period towards the end the talk. These regions were linked via a trade corridor stretching from the Gulf of Gabes that was going through the Nafusa to Ghadames, and were incorporating traces and parts of the Limes Tripolitanos. And here is the reconstruction of the Limes Tripolitanos. We take here the Trousset. We started in the region of Tataouine with the Trousset seminal work conducted with Maurice Zena and Abdelmajid Enabli, which remains foundational. And we employed a multidisciplinary approach using survey, using drone, and mapping archaeological sites that you can see in this map. We revisited the sites that were identified already by Trousset. Unfortunately, some of them are lost. And we have also found new sites. So we have considered, and I will use here some specific case studies. In particular, the region contains significant remains. I'm talking about the two regions together now, and the region of Tataouine. The region contains significant Roman period archaeological remains, notably linked to the Limes Tripolitanos, which supported a network of forts, such as, for instance, Lelata and also Rasselane, which is located here in the region of Tataouine. The name Talalati of Rasselane derives from the Antonine itinerary, and it was first associated with the fort of Rasselane by the French scholar de la Marche in the late 1880s. His early investigations were mostly were not really stratigraphic, were not really stratigraphic excavations as often happened in that time. And so his initial work that we have placed here, his map above one of the results of our flight with the drone. His work was left a lot of open elements for consideration. In 1903, Gauquelet again returned to revisit the site and confirmed the date to the Severan origin, and identified additional remains, and later also Toten and other French archaeologists between the end of the 19th century, the 20th century and the beginning of the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century visited these sites and provided them the map. This is the map with the three reconstructions of the site from the book of Mattingly. These studies then suggested that the fort was likely to be constructed in the mid-3rd century under the Emperor Gallienus. And these definitions were mostly accepted by Trousset and by Mattingly, that acknowledged possible Antonine Severan origins, but ultimately dating to the foundation of Gallienus origins. So in 2023, we did a UAV survey, and we revealed some discrepancies, especially in the orientation of the north and western auxiliary building, as well as some differences with the earlier plans. A lot more of these sites of this site are visible from the drone survey. And I should thank here my student Tom Millin, who put together all this information in his master dissertation. The excavation, we also conducted a small excavation in the Rasselane that wasn't really an excavation, was mostly a cleaning of one of the many robbery trenches that are visible on the site. And here we identify an initial construction of 3 walls, then a first destructions event that caused the collapse, further deposition, and a second destruction phase, which occurred later. And finally, a child grave that you can see here, which cut across all the stratigraphy that we identified. And finally, the robbery trench that was dug between 2009 and 2010 based on the findings that we had. The pottery recorded from the trench spans chronologically from the 3rd to the 7th century. And as you can see, the site includes a 93 per 93 meters castra with 4 cardinally aligned gates surrounded by a sprawling vicus built with locally quarried limestones. There is evidence of hydraulic mortar suggesting storage structures like horea, and kiln remains and abundant kitchenware points to the long-term habitation supported by the medium-sized dwelling. So there was also a large Severan bathhouse to the north, featuring hypocaust heating and Stardom Roman bathing element. But unlike standardized frontier layouts, the vicus developed organically, resembling more like Remada, which is further south along the same alignment. And the site developed around a spring. The Russellane, in fact, means head of a spring. The settlement probably also had commercial function near the Wadi, which also defined the northern boundary of the site. This Russellane, Tlelati, Castra, and Vicus served, therefore, as a strategic and economic hub, enabling Roman military oversight and economic developments. From the excavation conducted in the Romery Trench, the sector investigated suggested that there were 2 destruction events, one dated around 230, 240, and another one in the 7th century. And then a later burial that cut across all the phases. And this is the first site that we documented in detail, which is under threat because there is a modern quarry that is progressively eroding the extension of this site. I'm now moving to a second site that I want to focus on today, which is Enchir Seghi, which is in fact a new site. You can see it's very close to Russellane, which is a sort of a new site that we have identified thanks to our colleague Nadia Tebai. And Enchir Seghi lies within a wide archaeological plain on the left bank of the Wadi Gordab in the northeast of Tataouine, and it's bordered to the west by an olive grove. Lieutenant Moreau visited the site in 1904, noting that it had been flattened with no major surface remains. This site it was then never mentioned again and rediscovered in 2023 by our colleague Nadia Tebai at the Institut National des Patrimoines, who was doing her PhD dissertation on the Romanization of Tataouine. Although so we documented the site with a drone. We also did a survey, and we also attempted a small trench excavation that didn't give much result because most of the site has been completely erased. So although heavily deteriorated, Enchir Seghi still preserves some archaeological features, mostly earthquake structures, ditches, and some cisterns. In particular, there is this trio of cisterns, these three cisterns aligned. To the northwest of the ancient site, there is a large ancient cistern that was measuring 16 by 4 meters, and which is still used nowadays, with an estimated capacity of 22 meter cube. It is supplied by a 37 centimeter wide channel leading into a circular settling basin. We documented the sites using the drone, and we also attempted the excavation of the trench, but through the analysis of the drone documentation, we were able to identify earthwork, a ditch, and a ditch around the site that was about 20 square meters, which comprised 4 different distinct structures: an hydraulic installation, which include the water system that I mentioned, that also gives the names to the site because El Seghi means cisterns. And then several necropolis located in different parts of the site, especially to the north and the east edge of this site. We did also a survey collection, and we collected a substantial quantity of African kitchenware, mainly coming from Nabol, Puput, and Sabrata. And most of the pottery is dated between the 2nd and the 4th centuries, suggesting that the settlement integrated into the regional trade network. The quantity and the uniformity of the ceramics imply that Tenshir Segi might have served as a storage center for traded goods, maybe a place of stockage along the main trade route. As I said, Tenshir Segi is also under threat because of the modern construction, because also of the looters, because also in this case, the site was deeply excavated by illegal excavation. And I move now to another part of the presentation, which is the Wadi Zindag. So we did in the attempt. It was impossible to conduct a survey of the whole region. So we did we sampled some areas, and we did a survey in the Wadi Zindag, and we identified a number of new settlements, or new Roman settlements. In the area of Tigrim, for instance, we identified a site that is dated between the 2nd and the 7th century with continuity of occupation. As you can see here, we identified new sites, forts, mausolea, which are, as you can see, not in very good state of preservation, and the complete documentation of these geographical area survey should be a priority, because they are fast disappearing. As I said, some of the true sites are also not visible anymore. And in our work on the Wadi Sendak, we focused on the site of Kasr Zanata, because the Wadi Zendag is a key geographical feature that goes from Kasr Zanata, from the area of Tataouine, to Gadames. So it follows the Wadi, and probably is an ancient trade route that is in use, as we will see, from the Roman period. Kasr Zanata, or Kasr Gadim, or Gazr Zanata, is overlooking this major trade route. And here you can see Kasr Zanata is a square in size. And this site, because of its location, certainly played a key role in the regional movement and commerce, and from the Roman period possibly to the medieval period and later. It is considered one of the oldest Gazr in the area, and the dating is based on an inscription in the intrados of the entrance of the arch that refers to the year 479 after the death of the prophet. And it's, to me, as I understand, the only inscription that used this dating. This means around 1107 CE. This data aligns with the migration also of the Banu Hilal tribes to Ifriqiya, and the displacement of the Zenata Berber community. In its current form, therefore, Kasr Zenata dates to the beginning of the 12th century because of the importance of this inscription and this document. We also did specific documentation and conservation of this inscription. But although in this current format, Kasr Zenata refers to the 12th century and has all the characteristics of a local kasr except its shape, because these are typical medieval granaries that are present in the regions of Tataouine and the Nafusa. And these granaries are characterized by storage cells. You can see here small storage cells, probably had 2 stories, and each of these cells is called gorfa, and each family of the community had a gorfa, possessed a gorfa, where all the goods and the food of the family was stocked for 1 year. So they were kind of preserving them. And this, as you can see, this is a fortified structure, so it was guarded and it was protected. And the first floor was accessible directly from the ground, and the second floor there are protruding stones in the building that they can be used as a ladder to go to the second and third floor. And this structure of communal granaries are present in all of Tataouine and the Nafusa. But the unique aspect of this kasra is not oval in shape, as normally these communal granaries are, but is in, as you can see, rectangular. And so the kasra, as it stands, went through major restorations in the 90s. You can see how it looked like before they started the restoration by the French architect Louis. And in this restoration, we believe that massive, significant earthworks were removed and removed the earlier structures of this construction. In fact, the survey that we did around the building allowed us to identify a dump of soil that was rich in Roman ceramics that dated from the 2nd century to the 7th century, and then there were some material dated to the medieval period. So this continuous presence of ceramic that we think came from the work conducted, the restoration work conducted by Louis, associated with this unique shape of this castle, reminds more of a Roman fort than a medieval Amazigh castle. We think that this might have been a Roman structure that continued to be used in the early medieval period, perhaps as a rebat, and then as a granaries, because of its position overlooking this major trade route conducting to the Nafusa. And in fact, you can see here the location of Kasr Zanata, which is along this major trade route that goes from Kasr Zanata and then moves progressively south and reach Ghadames. And one important thing is that all these sites, all these fortified constructions in the hills were probably connected in connection with this ancient trade route. Now I'm going to consider from Kasr Zanata another similar site, which is the site of Wasim. And when we look at Wasim, I'm going to move away from the region of Tataouine and start the region of Nafusa. Wasim is the first site immediately after the border between Libya and Tunisia. So it's the first site you encounter in the Nafusa. And the region of Nafusa is very complex, as you can see, with many different villages. Wasim is the first one, and then you have Nalut, Kabau, Jadu, Yefren, and you can see all of these continuity of occupation of these villages. I have to say that the Kasra in the Nafusa, these fortified granaries, were mostly destroyed during the Ottoman period when the people of the Nafusa revolted against the Ottomans. So as a revenge against this revolt, many of these Kasra were destroyed. So the ones who are still preserved are really important to be maintained for a long time. And one of these granaries we have been working on, concentrating on, is the Kasr Kabau, which is very well preserved, but due to the fragility of the architectural system on which that is used to build these constructions, part of it are collapsing. So because of the fragility of this architecture and the fragility of the rocks, as I will explain, these sites is really important to really document in detail this site now that they are still preserved. We did a 3D model of Kasr Kabau of the interior and the exterior of all the rooms. So going back to Wasim, Wasim is a very important site in the sense that gives us the idea on how fragile these settlements are, because you can see this site has almost completely collapsed at the bottom of the valley. And this is due, of course, to the incredible drought that has occurred in the last years, with no rain and no water, in fact. And this is the effect of the climate change, and also has affected the local vegetation. We know that the majority of the production in this region was characterized by olive oil and olive production. And in the last few years, actually 7 years, they told us it has not been possible to continue with this production because of the lack of water. So if you try to climb up on top of this site of Wasim, you can really feel the soil that is crumbling under your feet. And this is unfortunately also from the result of the work that Lisa Moll has done in Cennini, the fate that almost all these villages will have in maybe in 100 years, in 200 years. In some areas will be faster, in some other areas will be slower. But this is a process that is going to be inevitable. And that's why we have seen as a priority the need to document these sites digitally with 3D models, with reconstruction, so that the memory of how they looked like will remain forever. And I'm now going to move to another site that is along this major trade route. We have seen Wasim, and I'm going to focus on the site of Ouigo. And I'm providing here some preliminary results of the work we have done. But of course, because of the interruption of our work in Libya, we have not been able to complete the work. We just restarted in June with some field work, and we will do another more detailed survey in Ouigo later on. So Ouigo, we documented it in 2022 with a drone, it's along this major trade route. It is located in the Nafusa, in the eastern part of the region of Al Araba, and is often mentioned by Ibadite sources starting from the 9th century, especially in relation to the numerous illustrious personalities that were originating from the site of Ouigo. The site is located on a plateau, which is crossed by many small wadis and extends over an area of more than a kilometer. It has been heavily disturbed by agricultural works whose mechanical excavations have substantially erased or reburied a good part of the site surface. So not only the rock that is crumbling is damaging in these sites, but also the human interventions. As a result, only the houses on the crests of the reliefs survived without being affected by this work, and these are one of the few. So this once belongs to a peculiar architectural typology. You have a single rectangular buildings of 10 by 15 meter long, built with good quality dressed stone and put in place with mortar on almost regular rows. Where the perimeter and internal walls are sufficiently preserved and legible, it has been recorded a distinctive plan consisting of a central court with 2 vaulted rooms at both ends, entirely open towards the central space. The preserved buildings are built aligned along the edge of the low cliffs, where openings to the underground rooms have been excavated. We don't know, though, if these underground rooms were excavated in relation to the houses for storage or if they are later excavation. This is something that we cannot really identify. In the southern part of the site is the mosque, which is probably one of the two Uyghur mosques mentioned by sources as early as the 9th century. But also in this case, the preservation is under threat because you can see the remains of an older mosque have been heavily restored with the construction of a large concrete room next to the two of the original naves of the mosque. So despite the historical importance of the site, Uyghur has never been subject of systematic archaeological investigation, and even its protection is not supported by adequate documentation. So the methodology, we adopted a specific methodology that is the same we have adopted in the case of Shenini, which I will mention later. The methodology adopted focused on documenting the site from its earliest phases, beginning with the creation of a detailed topographical plan. And to achieve this, we employed photogrammetry, conducting grid pattern drone flights across the entire area, which was approximately of 1.2 kilometers by 700 meters and a consistent altitude of 40 meters. And because of the light, we had to do it in 3 days. We also put some ground control points strategically placed to measure using topographic GPS to ensure spatial accuracy. And in parallel, we use the SW map application to catalog and photograph all visible sites and structures in the site of Uyghur, the same process we have used at Shenini. This dual approach allowed us to produce a comprehensive orthophoto that you can see here and topographic map with precise elevation data onto which surface level archaeological features were plotted. And these outputs are essential not only for the safeguarding of the site, but also to guide us in future archaeological activities. In fact, our work allowed us to identify 5 areas, 5 clusters where the monuments appear to be more elevated and pre-existing all the other construction in the site. And in fact, we did some, well, actually, I should say, our colleague Mofta kindly did an initial survey for us, and we aim to go again in December, January to complete this survey. He did a survey in these 5 areas, and we identified pottery that dates from the 4th to the 7th century and then to the medieval period, suggesting that this site developed from earlier settlements that are probably occupied already from the Roman period. So together with the data of Kasrat Zanata and Wasim, the data here support the long debated hypothesis of sustained occupation from the Roman into the medieval period in the region of Tataouine and Nafusa. And however, further investigation of individual sites will remain necessary. And I'm moving now to a different case of a monument that is under threat because of conflict reasons. And I move to the site of Sufet. Sufet has a mausoleum, Roman mausoleum dating to the 3rd century and a fort nearby. And it was partially restored by the Department of Antiquities. You can see here the traces of the restoration and reconstructed. However, the site was occupied after the revolution by a militia who lived in this area for about 1 year. And they used the standing Roman remains for practicing shooting. We did a 3D model of this monument, and one element that we identify is that not only the shooting, but also the threat to this monument is not only the shooting, but also the trench that has been excavated all around the monument that you can see very well. And also inside the monument, some looters have excavated a very deep hole in search probably of a treasure. So the stability of the monument is under threat, and we are in the process of documenting also all the damage from the bullets that you can see here very well, and the overall static stability resistance of the monument to inform the Department of Antiquities on the needs for conservation to preserve this monument. The study of the impact of the bullet is conducted by Lisa Moll, who is an expert on this specific type of research. But our focus has been primarily on the impact of the trench and of the hole excavated inside the monument to reach the exposed treasury. The project, and now I'm moving to the medieval period, included the documentation of the medieval villages, which in many cases were occupied until recent times. And here you can see a map of all the Kasr, Ksur, of the Ksur in the region of Tataouine. In particular, we have been focusing on the case of Shenini, which is in the region of Tataouine, which suffers, according also to the work that Lisa Moll has conducted, the same threat that Wasim is, the same problem that Wasim is having, although Shenini is in an earlier stage of the phenomenon. So that gives you an idea of the destiny of these villages cut into the mountains that are very typical of this region. So the work in Shenini has been focusing on the documentation of the site using a drone, but also a specific study of the building technique that was used, that is still used nowadays by the local people to construct these villages and these houses. From a geological point of view, the mineral constituent elements of the architecture of Tataouine and the Nafusa are basically four elements: the gypsum, the limestone, the clay, and the siliceous rocks. The first one plays a pivotal role, both as a rock commonly used in the construction of the wall facades, but also, and above all, employed as a binder following its dehydration with firing and in underground kilns. The selection of rocks and the firing procedures and the refining of the mortar follows procedures handed over locally for generations. And unfortunately, they are about to disappear. There are less and less people capable to do this type of construction, especially in the region of Tataouine. There is only one person in Shenini who still know how to cut the mountains in order to excavate a room inside the mountains. So this is a major issue. And in the preservation of this issue. So the mortar obtained from sulfates is also used on the internal and external walls and in the coating of the walls. As we have seen inside, they are all decorated. But they are very, very weak, and they are subject to the erosion by salt. Very weak, and we have seen the collapse in the case of Cabao earlier, is the way in which they construct vaults. They use palm trunks sewn longitudinally, and this is basically the only resource of wood they have, because the olive tree, the wood from the olive tree is much stronger and is used in areas with particular stress, such as mills or architraves or bases of flight of stairs, as you can see here. This is, in fact, one of the major issues. You can see here the decoration inside of the vaults. So once they have laid down these wooden trunks, they start building the vault, and then they do the decoration. Here you can see a graph, and you can see a detail of the decoration, of the interior of the decoration, that is recorded everywhere in the Nafusa and as well in Shenini. Shenini has been our case study. It's one of these mountain villages, partially cut into the mountain and partially built. We can actually date it quite well to the 12th century because of an inscription that was found by the architect Louis inside one of these buildings. So again, we are in the period of the Banu Hilal, but this inscription offers to us a terminus ante quem for the existing construction, but we don't know exactly when the site was occupied. This long period of occupation, this constant transformation makes it very difficult to understand if there was an earlier occupation in this case. The city of Shenini was mostly abandoned in the 60s when the president required all the inhabitants of these villages to move to the valley to better integrate with the communities. Although some of the inhabitants of Shenini refused to move out, so some parts of the city still inhabited. Here we applied the same methodology we used at Ouigout, although here is much more complex. We did a drone survey with ground points, and then we created this orthophoto. And then we developed a specific app for recording individual buildings and evaluate the condition assessment. And with the use of SWV map, which takes the point GPS of each individual building and send all the documentation directly to GIS, our trainees have numbered and documented every door of the site of Shenini. We have created so far a massive GIS with all the information where every building has been sort of evaluated and documented. And in some cases, we couldn't do it on all of the buildings because of the scale of it. In some cases, we have also created a 3D models using LiDAR of the interior of the houses. So this is an overview of what we have conducted. As I said, in Tataouine, we are completing the project. In Nafusa, we will finish the project soon. All the work we have done in the region of Tataouine is now conveying into a new center for the promotion of the heritage of Tataouine, which is funded by the Cultural Protection Fund and will be open on the 11th of November with the British ambassador and the governor of Tataouine. And this is the first digital interactive center in Tunisia. A part of it will be dedicated to craft work and craft activities with documentaries about crafts, and part will be about the history and of the territory through time from the Roman into the modern times. And we will have display of material, boards connected with more information in a website, and some interactive table. And I now play a model, one of these 3D documentation that we will display in the museum for you to look at. And at the end of this is the end of my talk. So my last slide is thank you. I have finished, sorry.
Thank you so much, Anna. That is just absolutely fantastic. It is so cool to see all of the work that you're doing across this really wide region. All those models are so cool, and that video is really, really great. Yeah, so we have a couple sort of comments and questions already, so I will dive right in. The first one, just a very quick thing from Huda Ben Younes, who points out that the word Segi, you talked about that site sort of towards the Hench of Segi, actually means cisterns. So
Yeah,
just
that's exactly what, yeah, I did say. It is effectively certainly something that because these systems have been visible in the landscape for a long time, and in fact, some of them are reused, and that's why they are so well preserved because they've been reused in recent times, still in use, in fact.
yeah, absolutely makes sense. Okay, and then so we have another comment and question from David Mattingly, who says, "Wonderful project, Anna. It's fantastic to see such high quality work on these important and for so long understudied sites. I'm especially impressed by your bringing together a team that involves both Tunisian and Libyan colleagues. So not really a question, but congratulations. And to say I cannot wait to see the final published results. I remember visiting Chinini nearly 40 years ago and observing a traditional olive press in action. Is that still there?"
So I did see this olive press, and unfortunately, the owner of the olive press told us that they have not been in use for the last 8 to 9 years because of the lack of water, and the olives they can't produce olives, so they can't use these olive presses, so they have not been in use. But thank you, David. We wait for you in Tataouine. You must come and visit us.
Yes, wouldn't that be wonderful? I would love to go as well.
We can organize a trip there.
Um, Okay, so just to be, yes, so we have another comment from Huda Ben Younes. So they say, you mentioned at the beginning that one of the goals of the project is conservation. Have you planned to conserve any of the Kasur or troglodyte houses? I'm also wondering why you chose to build a new structure rather than rehabilitate an existing old house or kasar into a center. Wouldn't that have been more consistent with the project's objectives? Um, I might let you comment on that. There's a couple comments here, but perhaps so why don't I let you comment on that
Okay, so
first?
we have restored the Kasr Zanata. So we have restored the entrance of the Kasr. In Libya, we are unable to do restoration of the Kasr, but we will produce a conservation plan for them to carry it on. And in terms of the center, in fact, it is an old house that has been given to us by the governor because belongs to the governorate of Tataouine. And so I think the house in itself was built in the 50s. And it's in an ideal location because it's right at the bottom of Shenini, where also a restaurant is. So it's a key, a very important area where everyone will go. And as I said, is very simple inside because of the space of these rooms, because the museum is inside the excavated rooms, the troglodytes, as they call it, although I don't like this, inside the excavated rooms, but the space is very narrow because well, it's a long story, but we were obliged to put metal cages to protect the visitors. So the space has become very small. So we have a few posters, and then there is each poster is a QR that is connected to a website. So it's a very visitor-friendly center. So the visitor can engage as much as he wants or she wants on knowing about the history of this region.
Great, thank you. So just continuing on Huda's comment here, they say, I also noticed that you refer to the Arabic names of places around Tataouine, whereas many of these areas were and still are predominantly inhabited by Amazigh communities. For example, Ras Al Ain actually corresponds to the Amazigh word tlalet, not talalati as mentioned, and Wazim should be Wazin, which has its own meaning in the Amazigh language. Another point that caught my attention is your reference to the Banu Hilal when describing the inscriptions found on the arches. These regions were inhabited by Amazigh populations, and while the inscriptions use Arabic letters, they also include Amazigh symbols. The subject has already been explored in several studies.
Yeah. Okay, so in terms of the names, yes, Tlalet is the modern name. I didn't mention this. We actually work with a community of Arab women from Tlalet because we worked with both Amazigh and Arabs. And the spelling of these names, I understand, is very debated because Ali Thepti, for instance, in our map on the Kasra, made us changing the spelling about 4 times. So I think it's a subject that is beyond my knowledge, not being Amazigh myself and not being a Arabist. So thank you for the comment.
And then finally, one more comment from Huda. Finally, I was expecting to see at least one reconstruction proposal for one of the sites. Was that part of your plan?
No, we didn't do any reconstruction because ethically we don't think it's good, it's correct, because we don't know how they exactly looked like, and doing a entire reconstruction would be inappropriate. Also, it's extremely difficult to do reconstructions of caves because unless you do the decoration inside, and we have done some 3D documentation of the interior of the houses with the decoration, but if you were to reconstruct entirely a building, this would be extremely complex. I know a lot of people do reconstructions today, but I'm against reconstruction for the sake of reconstruction. I think there has to be a very detailed study behind it. And I don't think in the framework of this project we have time because it's finishing. So, but thank you. That's a good comment.
That's a very, yeah, reconstruction is often a very difficult thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um, They responded, thank you for answering my questions. Best of luck with the rest of the project.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have another question from Anas Girab. And they ask, why are we talking about the region of Tataouine in a historical context while medieval sources talk about the region of Gomrasen? Tataouine is a colonial will to settle population during the 20th century.
Okay, so we use modern definition because we did the work in this geographical area now, and we worked with the governorate of Tataouine, so we are linked to this definition, and that's why we do it, because then we should talk it the limes Tripolitanos, we should call it Tripolitania. So in every historical moment, it changed name, so we keep the last name, the modern name as a reference, because we did work here now. I hope this answers your question.
I have a question for you. I was just sort of wondering what's sort of next on the project. Is there plans to sort of widen scope, visit more sites, do more of these models and record more of them, or are you concentrating on the sites where you've already done this
So
work? What are the next steps?
in Tunisia, we have substantially finished the work. And in Libya, we are aiming to return to do a survey in Ouigout, just to define better where the Roman remains are. And also, we have planning. We have documented also the Mosque of Abu Madi, which is a very important mosque with a Quranic school mentioned by the medieval sources, because many Ibadi was the center of the Ibadi literature and work, and we have documented it, and we will provide a full planning for the conservation of the site. As I said, we also documented all Kasr Kabao inside. We documented every single cell, Gorfa, with its decoration, but it wasn't ready to show now. And finally, we are planning to do a conservation of a small oratory, prayer room that is near the modern mosque of Kabao, that from the decoration recall the very early decoration, 8th, 9th century decorations. So we are aiming to restore this building and to do as another small center in Cabao, similar to the one we have done in Tataouine, probably smaller in size, because we have done in the end less work in Libya than we were able to do in Tataouine region.
Thank you. Yes, well, as sort of David already said, sure we'll all really look forward to seeing more about this work and seeing what else you do. Okay. Oh yes, sorry. Here's another question that we have here from Rabab Al Kadiri, who says, thank you, Anna and team, for such a wonderful project. I know you couldn't get into the intangible heritage conservation part of your project, but maybe you could just give us some quick details about that. I'm very interested, as I'm planning to do my PhD in a similar line of research.
Okay, so in the intangible heritage, the work was led by Anita Radini, and the work has been focusing specifically on textile. And on textile, she has been working on recovering ancient methods used in these textile practices. And I have to say that in the Nafusa, the tradition is more preserved than it is in Tataouine. We have seen that there are some issues of costs that are impacting on the work that they are doing, like wool is very expensive. We don't have, we don't see we see the appearance of chemical colors. So we did, well, Anita did a lot of work on the reasons of these changes. And one thing is, for instance, the women all complained about the quality of the wool, that is not as it used to be. And in fact, it depends from the way in which they breed the sheep, so that now, because of climate change, they are kept under a tent. Or natural coloring has been replaced by chemical colors because of the quantity of water the natural coloring requires, but also because some of the plants that they were using for coloring are disappearing. So there are elements that are impacting on these activities. Then, of course, the fact that nobody wants to use traditional dress for weddings, so the practices are disappearing. And this is also the reason why we particularly worked with a group of women to create objects that incorporate ancient crafts, but produce modern products, like, for instance, these I don't know if you can see this pencil case. And in order for them to sell also online to acquire an income, and so to support the local communities. And the final point, we also worked with women who make baskets. And also in this case, they are worried about their main source that they go to collect on the riverbanks because of the climate change, and these are progressively also disappearing. So the climate change is impacting substantially on the practices of these crafts. Then, of course, we interviewed, for instance, an old man who makes baskets, and he told us that nobody wants to learn from him anymore, and nobody uses baskets anymore because they all use plastic, and plastic has damaged the landscape, but also kind of made ancient crafts disappearing. So many aspects you can investigate in the
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Mm.
Okay, let's see a couple more questions and comments. So Philip Sharp says, I agree about your view on the difficulties of carrying out restoration, but have you identified urgent stabilization works to try and arrest some of the most high-risk dilapidation?
So yes, we in the work we have done in Shenini, for instance, we have in the process of documenting and doing condition assessment, we have identified the areas which are more under threat, and we have highlighted them as priorities. And they actually, have to say, the Institut National de Patrimoine has very skilled people who know exactly the ancient techniques. Like one of our trainees, Tarek Boubakri, is a person who knows really how this work was done in the past and can reproduce them. So we have identified, and we have also done a lot of work in training conservators, local workmen, because there is nowadays the tendency to use cement instead of traditional practices because it's faster and it costs less. But cement is a very terrible product to be used because it kind of erodes the stones. So it's something that shouldn't be used in the area. What also we noticed in Shenini is that in recent times they've restarted digging houses in the mountains because they cost less than building a new house somewhere else. And unfortunately, they are doing this using a lot of cement. So this is a major issue for the long-term preservation. So we do have identified priorities, and we are actually preparing a management plan for the Institut National de Patrimoine on the territory of Tataouine and Chenini in particular, to support the process of conservation and preservation of these sites.
Very good. Let's see. So, Huda says, I'm back with one last question, I promise. I know some researchers in Nafusa who suggest that certain underground mosques and even some synagogues were originally Byzantine churches. Interestingly, some of them are still called khanis, meaning church in Arabic. Have you considered exploring this angle, either within this project or in future research?
Well, yes, this really interests me because these are hypotheses, and I don't think there have ever been done any detailed excavation to try to prove this point. So yes, absolutely, I find it extremely fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very, very interesting point. Right. Well, if there are no further questions, we don't have any further in the chat. Now, before we wrap things up, I would like to just highlight two of our upcoming Billness events. On the 4th of November, our Billness archivist, Anne-Marie Williamson, will be giving a talk jointly authored with Andrew Gowdy on women explorers in North Africa. This talk is a special joint event with the Egyptian Exploration Society, and do just note that it will be at 1 p.m. in the afternoon rather than Billness's normal kind of evening time. So you can you can find the link to register either through Billness's website or the EES, the Egyptian Exploration Society website. And then also, just a reminder to please mark your calendars now for our annual lecture, which will take place on the evening of the 27th of November at the British Academy in London. Our speaker will be Professor Corzan Fenech, who will speak on her work in Morocco. So please look out for more details and how to register for that in the coming weeks. And so all that is really left for me to do is to thank you all for coming this evening and to thank Anna again for this just extremely interesting lecture on this really important and incredible work that you're doing. So thank you very much, Anna,
Thank
and
you.
thank you everyone. And good
Bye-bye.
evening.
Bye.